My name's Justin McClure, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're talking about two comedian heavyweights.
And you know, it's interesting, Justin. Nowadays, comedians have very peculiar names. You say, you got Who's on First, you got What's on Second, you got I Don't Know's on Third.
Yep, classic bit that was created and written and performed by the comedian we're talking about today, right? Abbott and Costello. Why are you making faces at me?
Well, created. I don't know if Abbott and Costello created anything.
No, I don't think they did.
And when you think of Abbott and Costello, it's not like you look at the Marx Brothers, you look at your Charlie Chaplins, your Buster Keatons, and you associate them with innovations, or you think comedy changed after them. I don't know if comedy changed after Abbott and Costello. If anything, they were like an aggregation. They were like the definitive example of something.
When people talk about them, they like to say, oh, they continued this vaudevillian tradition, putting these jokes that otherwise would have fallen away into history and making them popular again, like the Who's on First routine, which was popularized by them, but it wasn't their creation. That was an old, dusty thing that had existed forever.
Sure. Back in the day, turn of the 20th century, in the burlesque halls and the vaudeville houses, you know, in burlesque, between the striptease acts, you would have these baggy pants comedians who would come out. And typically, they would just pull from the same well of, I don't know, somewhere between like 20 and 100 comedy sketches that every comedian used, whether it's the Susquehanna Hat Company routine, whether it's the mutter and fodder routine, whether it's the loafing routine. You know, I'm working at a bakery. What do you do there? Loafing. Wait, you mean you're loafing at a bakery? You know, classic stuff like that.
And everybody listening to this has heard all these routines in The Simpsons.
Niagara Falls. Slowly I turn, step by step, inch by inch. You probably heard the Three Stooges do that one.
Comedy, it can evolve, but the old chestnuts can just be repurposed, just like they were by Abbott and Costello.
You know, in vaudeville, there was this guy, his name was Lou Cristillo. He was just a boy with a dream. He wanted to become a famous Hollywood actor. He wanted to become a matinee idol. And he was also heavily influenced by his hero, Charlie Chaplin. Went to Hollywood. Things didn't really work out for him. Became a stuntman and became an extra, you know, not much to report, but he went into vaudeville and began a career as a dialect comedian.
To be more specific, a xenophobic comedian. In this case, he was parodying the Dutch, which in his eyes, they didn't understand English very well, so there's a lot of comedy out of that.
I mean, you've got to understand that, I don't know, I'm just going to spitball it here. 80% of vaudeville and burlesque comedians were doing some ethnicity
80%.
or another.
More like 98%.
I'm just pulling that number out of thin air. It's like Chico Marx, he's an Italian guy,
yeah,
right?
That's right. That's the comedy.
But yeah, Lou did a Dutch act, and then meanwhile, there was another guy named...
Another star
named Bud Abbott, who was born into a family of vaudevillians. He, in his younger years, worked the box office at a New York theater where he was giving pay to the likes of Fanny Brice and W.C. Fields. Eventually worked his way up to, I guess, the middle. Sooner or later, these two atoms hit each other. Is that the right metaphor? I don't know science.
Yeah.
What happens when an atom hits another atom?
Does a nuclear bomb of comedy.
They met at a place, Minsky's Burlesque, which was a famous kind of burlesque review.
Yep, the night they raided Minsky's, everybody's favorite motion picture.
And, you know, they hit it off. They started performing. I mean, they didn't quite become partners immediately, but this is about 1936 or so.
And what people that knew them at the time said was that Abbott could keep Lou in line. In that Lou had a tendency of going big and going wild. And what Abbott did was that he was the bully.
You know, we're talking about Abbott and Costello as if everybody listening has heard of them. Has everybody listening?
Yes, they have.
They've
Everybody knows Abbott and Costello Meet the Monsters.
Yeah, they know Meet Frankenstein, I guess, even if they haven't seen it, and they know Who's on First. Mm-hmm. Everybody's seen Who's on First.
That's it, I think. Other than that, maybe they caught some of their TV appearances, but those, like, 29-ish other movies that they made.
36.
Yeah, nobody watches those.
When I was a kid, Blockbuster Video, my local Blockbuster Video, had them all. And I feel like I was the last, like the very last generation. Like in the 90s, I rented a bunch of Abbott and Costello movies.
I never, ever went through an Abbott and Costello phase, to the point that this week I had to differentiate which one was Abbott and which one was Costello.
So I'm actually quite excited to have this discussion because I have Abbott and Costello baked into my genes.
Fever, if you will.
When I was watching Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein this week for maybe the 15th time in my life, maybe the 20th, who knows, I was just thinking about how, this is one of the quintessential movies for me.
Oh, absolutely. I once played it at a 24-hour movie marathon, and it killed. It was like everybody's favorite.
Yeah, I still think it's like a borderline perfect movie.
Yes, I agree with
you. And
you.
the only one that comes close to being a perfect movie, but it's very good. But it was only this week, after all these years, that I actually started to think, okay, why are these guys funny? What do
I like about them?
What do I like about them? Because, well, maybe I'll get into those theories later, but what do you think of them?
Well, from what I watched, and again, I only know them from Meet Frankenstein and a few skits here and there that I've seen, is that it's essentially Ted Healy and Curly, just Ted Healy beating up on Curly the entire time.
Right.
When you're a kid, you love Lou Costello. He's funny, he acts like a child, he has a catchphrase, "I'm a bad little boy."
Hey, Abbott!
Nobody likes Abbott, who, like, in some of the movies that we watched, scenes he just, like, slaps him around, and there's no joke. And it's not even, like, a funny slap. It's, like, a slap that, like, it looks like it really hurts.
Well, when you watch Laurel and Hardy, like, they belong together. They are otherworldly beings. You imagine that if one of them was separated from the other, they would curl up and die. There's a gravitational force pulling them together. They love each other. They may not like each other, but they love each other. I don't know about Abbott and Costello, though.
No, I don't think so. I think that...
Why do they...
As their characters, Abbott would probably leave Costello to die if the situation arose.
I think Abbott could get along just fine without him.
Yes.
And I don't know. I think Costello could maybe get along just fine without him.
But would Abbott... Would he have had any kind of career, like, as a performer?
Oh, well, I'm not sure if either of them would have had a career without each other, but within the diegesis of the films... They both seem to varying degrees capable.
Like you said, why are they hanging around with each other?
Yeah. It's like they don't seem to have this kind of almost semi-romantic bond that other comedians have.
I mean, let's use the example of Three Stooges, which we've talked about a lot, but like these three guys, they punch, they poke at each other, but at the end of the day, they're in it together and they care about each other. You never get that from Abbott and Costello.
And with Martin and Lewis, there's something almost like weirdly homoerotic between them, you know? Like they're both kind of handsome guys and there's a weird electricity there. And yeah, Abbott and Costello.
Nothing.
And yet, I never ever questioned it once in my life until this week.
I wonder if it's when you're a kid, you like to see someone act like a child, and by extension, someone who's acting like the controlling adult, putting that child in their place.
I guess so, yeah.
Because that makes sense, because it's not like three wacky guys like the Three Stooges, which I grew up with, and I love to no end. And like early on when I was watching these movies, the bad ones, when Costello would like make Curly-style noises, I would just go, oh, I wish I was watching the Three Stooges.
And yet, you know, watching the movies this week, I still kind of accept it. Maybe you don't, and I don't know what to attribute this to, but it's just like
maybe it's been baked in.
Abbott and Costello, there they are.
But you know what? I'm saying this now, but Abbott and Costello were massive stars, starting with their film Buck Privates.
This one came out in 1941. It was their second screen appearance and their first starring vehicle. They had already worked their way up in about 4 or 5 years from burlesque to vaudeville to Broadway to radio and then finally to film. And Buck Privates is a service comedy. They go off to the army and it's just... a
bunch of skits.
I mean, there's a story, sure, but there are a half dozen, maybe, routines that they do.
Now, we've talked about the fact that they would insert musical numbers and romance plots in, like, later Marx Brothers films and how those were death. And through all of these Abbott and Costello films, they all have this terrible stuff that interrupts the comedy.
I watched Buck Privates less than a week ago. I cannot remember what the romantic plot... There's a love triangle.
But you remember that bit that they always do with the money, where it's like, can I borrow 50 cents? No, I only got 40. Okay, give me that. You owe me 10. Wait, what?
Okay, I love that bit.
Great bit.
And I love that because like their patter is like Monty Python, or to use an absurdly highbrow example, something like Harold Pinter or Samuel Beckett, where it's like there's a rhythm and it's like music, and you enjoy more than the comedy. You enjoy that musical rhythm.
What's fascinating about Abbott and Costello is that they kind of went backwards than like other comedians like the Three Stooges, which is they did features and then they moved to television, which was essentially the short form of them, which I think they work much better in.
I couldn't agree more. The early 50s, the Abbott and Costello show, which I think ran
just
2
like
seasons.
Pure dynamite.
It's so great. It's incredibly cheap, and all it is I mean, again, it also sort of has a story, but it's so much. There's no attempt at being cinematic.
Not at all.
They're surrounded by other vaudeville guys like Joe Besser,
yeah, that's
and
right.
others whose names I don't know, and yeah, they're just doing bits.
And Costello, as a performer, not only does he do the childish voice, which he supposedly only took to differentiate each other on the radio when they first started doing their radio shows, but he's a real physical comedian. He does like pratfalls. He's going all over the place.
Yeah.
And in the next movie that me and you watched, Hold That Ghost, there's nothing funnier than a comedian acting scared.
Hold That Ghost, which came out, I think, also in either 1941 or 1942. This is a fun fact, guys. They were so popular during the Second World War, they made 10 movies between 1941 and 1943. 4 in 1941, 4 in 42, 2 in 43.
So do you think that the massive popularity of Buck Privates also just came at the right time? Like, America's going into World War II. In 1941, you get a service comedy that kind of shines, a comedic light over something that a lot of people are experiencing.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell what exactly is in the waters that makes something comic resonate so strongly at one time. I read an interview with Buster Keaton this week, and Buster Keaton actually worked as a gag writer for Abbott and Costello for some of their MGM movies, which is depressing to think.
Oh, God.
He was at a low ebb when he was doing that. But he said something along the lines of, if you were to go back and look at that army picture they did, you'd find a very bad picture. But there were no Chaplin pictures, there were no Harold Lloyd pictures, there were no Keaton pictures. There was no competition.
I agree with Buster Keaton.
He's right.
Yeah.
And I mean, Abbott and Costello, they are not movie comedians in the way that somebody like Buster Keaton was, or Jerry Lewis would later be, where like they didn't think cinematically.
Well, they didn't really think at all about the stuff that they had to do. They had gag writers and stuff like that to do it for them, and they kind of showed up, and from stories I've read, they had a lot of money, they didn't know what to do with it, so they gambled a lot.
They gambled a lot, and then in the 50s, the tax man came calling and said, hey, you guys didn't pay your taxes for like 10 years.
And they were like, oh.
And an example was made of them.
Yeah.
And Costello went, I'm a bad boy.
But they kept making movies, and there was no attempt at like, oh, I feel like an artist, I want quality control. They just show up in whatever garbage was thrown their way.
Well, I read an anecdote, which I don't know how true it is, but in one of their movies, I think it's In Society, they do the Susquehanna Hat Company routine, and Costello insisted that the whole routine be done in one unbroken take. He would only do it once in one take, and you can say that's laziness, and maybe it was, but his argument would be, listen, like, this is how we do it, and a momentum gets built up. We can't do this in installments, and it was apparently an incredible like nightmare for the production. They had to have cameras everywhere, getting them at different angles.
I'm gonna say that's laziness. That he's like, I'm just doing it once.
It probably is laziness, but I mean, it also shows that he was somebody who thought in terms of the stage and thought in terms of audience laughter.
So, could you replace Abbott with any other straight guy comedian?
I actually want to hear what you think about this.
Yes, I do. You just get some angry guy that's yelling at Lou Costello throughout the movie, and I'm sure like super fans would be like, no, you don't understand. You haven't seen enough of these movies. And you know what? I'll agree with you. I have not seen enough of these movies. Will I watch that many more? No, I will not. I feel like I've seen all their best
Costello, that's enough of this nonsense.
Yeah, there you go. Whoa, it's like Abbott's in front of me right now. How about you, as a long-time kid fan of Abbott and Costello?
I do like Abbott. I heard Jerry Seinfeld this week say that he thinks Abbott is the greatest straight man in show business history.
But the difference between someone like Abbott and Dean Martin is that they have two very different personalities, but they're both straight man. But I don't think that Jerry Lewis could work with somebody else.
I don't think Jerry Lewis could work with Abbott.
No, definitely not.
Because Abbott has no sex appeal.
That's right. There's something else going on with Dean Martin.
Yeah.
Like, he's still cool. People still like him.
Yeah.
Like, no one's like, ooh, I want to see that Abbott by himself movie.
Yeah, nobody. Okay, there's an amazing Abbott and Costello cartoon show from the 60s or 70s where Bud Abbott did the voice. It was after Lou died, and Abbott sounds old as fuck.
He's just, like, on the point of death.
He sounds like Bernie Sanders.
He does sound like Bernie. And the cartoon is great because they're, like, fighting giant monsters, all the fun stuff they used to do in their movies.
Yeah, but to answer your question, I do like Abbott. I feel very fondly towards Abbott.
Yeah, but that's like you grow up.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but there's something about him. It's like, he's like the ultimate vaudeville straight man.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not charismatic. He's anti-charismatic, which is, to me, a weird sort of charisma.
It's just, watching these movies.
And that voice of his and his delivery.
It was never fun to see him, like, torture Lou Costello, especially in Hold That Ghost.
Okay, but here's my final case for Abbott. It's like, you listen to them do Who's On First when they were at their peak, and the timing is impeccable.
Yeah.
And Abbott is like a brick wall with Costello as Costello gets increasingly frustrated. Like, how can you argue with that? It's like...
Yeah, I guess the argument is that they became stars. If somebody else could do it, somebody else would have done it.
Yeah.
But it's these two specific combinations of things.
And, like, the verbal dexterity of their routines cannot be understated.
Yeah, people need to understand that, like, to be a straight man is difficult when the other person's getting all the laughs.
Yeah.
Because it would be easy to be like, oh, well, I want some laughs too, so I'm going to, like, break a little or do this. And Abbott never broke.
Yeah.
He was stoned the entire time.
And also, he torments Costello, but at least in my eyes... he gets away with it because he's not too attractive, or he's not too cool, or he's not too charismatic. It's like,
so you saw it if he was more of like a ladies' man kind of thing, and then he was slapping around Costello.
Yeah, it's like if he was Dean Martin slapping around Costello, it would look too mean.
But because he looks kind of,
Yeah, it looks like a bit of a...
just, a regular...
Just
schlup.
totally average.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about Hold That Ghost.
I keep trying to talk about it because it's so much fun.
I loved it, yeah.
If you showed somebody... Hold That Ghost, they'd be like, well, I want to see more Abbott and Costello movies, unless they don't like a adult man going over and over again.
Because that's the whole movie. It's Abbott and Costello, through circumstances too complicated to get into here, inherit a spooky mansion.
Yes, with a bunch of random people.
Just people they pick up along the way at a soda fountain where the bartender is Shemp.
Yes, I love it. Anytime he shows up in a service industry position.
And they go to the spooky house, and of course there are gangsters, but there seem to be spooky goings on, including the classic moving candle routine.
Yeah, where Costello sees a moving candle, is so scared and tries to get the person's attention.
He goes,
but by the time the person looks at him, the candle has stopped moving.
Yeah.
It would be recreated again in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And also in this movie, where there's a whole bit where the room keeps changing, and then Costello's like, oh, wait, come see. By the time he gets back, it's all...
Costello, what are you talking about? Now end this nonsense. The room didn't change.
And then he slaps him in the face. That's the scene where I was like, oh, okay. And this is a good example of sometimes the movies just slip by and somehow they look great.
Oh my god, this movie looks as good as like any of the Universal horror movies from the time. Just beautiful noir lighting.
And this one has a very minimal romance storyline. No musical numbers until the end, where it's like, I guess people leave around this.
Yeah, the Andrews sisters are in a lot of the early Abbott and Costello movies, which, many modern listeners will not know who the Andrews sisters are.
Well, I may not be a fan of Abbott and Costello, but I am a fan of the Andrews sisters.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't be?
Look at my tattoo! But, so this is, I think, a great starter movie, and I wonder if it's because... there's kind of like a plot line that's recognizable, while Buck Privates is like a bunch of episodic sketches with no weight, while this has, it's a ghost, and there's, an actual kind of threat to these characters, which is the same reason that people like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Right, the best Abbott and Costello film. In this one, I'm not going to
explain Abbott and Costello. Well, I mean, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein also has the amazing thing that all the Universal actors are also playing their roles.
That's right. You got Bela Lugosi as Dracula. You got Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman.
Oh, man, a very soused Lon Chaney Jr.
Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster. Boris Karloff did not accept the role, and this was the last appearance by all these monsters.
And Vincent Price as the Invisible Man. Very briefly at the end.
Yes. And as everyone always says, this is hardly a fresh insight. The key reason the movie works is because the monsters play it absolutely dead straight. It's a great showcase for the monsters. And Abbott and Costello get to be funny. The monsters get to be scary. I mean, the climax of the movie where it's the monsters chasing them around the castle is so good. So fun.
Yep.
And the movie is, I mean, it's like just a very well integrated movie where it looks great. The plot works and
it moves.
Yeah, it moves. You're going back and forth between the monsters and Abbott and Costello. The monster who they interact with the most is Lon Chaney Jr. And like Lon Chaney Jr. is allowed to have weight and dignity.
Yeah, that scene where he's transforming and he's like on the phone and he's like, I don't want it to happen.
Or there's that part where he goes, you don't understand. Every night when there's the full moon, I turn into a wolf. Yeah, you and 20 million other guys.
Classic bit. I mean, we don't need to talk this one up. Everybody, this is the one that comes up anytime horror comedy is mentioned. I
mean, I just realized that it's a movie that's so deep in my bones because it's got, Universal horror stuff and baggy pants vaudeville comedians.
Would Abbott and Costello still be remembered if they had not made that movie?
No. At least not to the degree they
we would not know them.
Right.
I was thinking of, what other comedians we watched for this podcast, like Wheeler and Woosley. They made a couple dozen movies. Yeah. They were never as popular as Abbott and Costello, but they continued to work.
Abbott and Costello were, in 1942, the #1 box office attraction.
They were huge.
They were bigger than Laurel and Hardy, bigger than the Marx Brothers.
And they never cheapened themselves early on with, short subjects. Mm-hmm. They were always in motion pictures, and before that, the radio.
Yeah. So the Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein actually came at a crucial moment in their career because they were wildly popular through the war. Their popularity started to ebb after the war. And then this movie revitalized them and led to a whole series of Abbott and Costello Meet Monster movies.
They're not good. That's why you've never heard about them.
They're all just the same thing, where it's like Costello gets spooked and Abbott goes, what are you talking about, Costello? There's no monster here, smack.
As the real monster is aging.
Yes.
Because it's happening as you watch these movies. Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. Wait, there's another monster one I'm missing, right?
Meet the Killer Boris Karloff.
Oh, wow.
That's the full title.
That was a real, I don't know. I guess they meet Boris Karloff.
Basically, any of the movies they made after 1950, don't bother with.
But because we did it for you. We watched the last Abbott and Costello movie.
That's Dance With Me, Henry from 1956. It was an independent production. It was after the end of their Universal contract. Their Universal contract ended in 1955. Dance With Me, Henry, I had never seen it until this week. It's
they're Max Rose.
Yeah, I mean, they really are old as fuck in this one. They're two guys. What's their relationship in this one?
I don't know, but I know that
normally they have some reason to be together.
Yeah, Abbott at one point frames Costello for a bank robbery that goes too far.
Okay, so Costello, he's got an adopted
son, Henry.
Yeah, adopted son, brother figure, and he's kind of a Chaplin-esque figure in this, he's very sentimental.
And he really wants to be able to adopt this kid, which personally, I don't think he should. I don't know if he's responsible enough.
And he and Abbott also are put in charge of this amusement park, or they inherit this amusement park. And they're gangsters.
It's not good.
Yeah, I mean, as you can tell by me describing it, my attention was drifting at a few parts. Because I'm sorry, there were actually no jokes in the movie, so there was nothing to hold my attention.
There's a few bits.
Okay, there's the bit where they're interrogating him and they leave the interrogation room.
And then he makes himself coffee, I think?
It's like that. You remember that Mr. Bean skit where Mr. Bean makes a whole lunch?
Mr. Bean, the Abbott and Costello of our generation.
It's like that. There's a lot of very tepid gags. I would have enjoyed seeing them do,
Who's on first?
Who's on first, yeah.
There's a clip of them online, getting on stage, and they're like, what bits do you want? And someone goes, who's on first? And they're like, is that really the one that you want to hear? And they're like, yay! He's like, okay.
Well, baseball players, they have very peculiar names nowadays.
Yep.
And it ends with a bunch of gangsters chasing Abbott and Costello, and a bunch of kids beating them with pots and pans, and they got squirt guns.
It's like it's a mad world where it's the old comedians handing it off to the kid generation.
Yeah, I was watching this scene with the kids and thinking, I don't know. I don't want to watch a children's film. That's what this is a movie for children. This is beneath.
I don't want to watch a children's film. Give me Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, please. Yeah. An adult comedy.
Yeah, I want to see Abbott and Costello in vaudeville with strippers in between their routines. Yeah, that's what I want to see.
Yeah, I mean, if they had lived just a little bit longer, there would have been like a Keyholes Are for Peeping that Abbott stars in.
Abbott and Costello were together for 19, 20 years. I think 20 years. They had ups and downs in their relationship. There was a period in the mid-40s when they went a whole year without speaking.
But they still acted in movies together. They would only speak to each other in the films.
There are 2 movies where they spend most of the movies apart, and they interact in like 1 or 2 scenes.
Nobody wants that.
Yeah, total shit. A Little Giant and Time of Their Lives. That's what they are. Can you believe I know that?
Yeah. I do believe that you know that.
Something else that I feel like bringing up, even though I'm not quite sure how it integrates into the discussion, is one of the key facts about Abbott and Costello is that Costello endured a horrible personal tragedy in his life. In 1943, he was struck with rheumatic fever at the very height of his fame. He was bedridden for 9 months. So all the movies stopped, all the radio shows stopped. But during that time, he had an infant son. And then on his son's first birthday, which was also the first day Costello was returning to his radio show, his infant son fell out of his crib, fell into the pool, and drowned. It's a very famous story that Costello went on with the radio show that night, and he said, because little Butch is going to hear me, wherever he is.
But he was never the same after that. Most people said that, like, his heart was just not in it anymore, because it hurt that much and continued to hurt throughout his career and his life.
And in fact, this week I actually listened to the radio broadcast that they did that night where Abbott comes out at the end of the show and explains what had happened. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but I mean, I'm not sure how the difference manifested itself.
So, in one sense, you can look at that and go, well, they were the ultimate professional comedians.
The show must go on.
That, like, they didn't really do their own material, but they took material that was well-known and did it as well as it could be done. Mm-hmm. And that's why they were stars.
Yeah.
And like all fading comedians in the time of television who need money, after Lou Costello passed away, Abbott found a lookalike that he tried to tour with.
Oh, well, yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? I mean, we've seen...
Interesting or very sad?
Well, we saw some pictures of the two of them together. And, okay, earlier on the episode, I was saying how you can't imagine Laurel and Hardy apart, or you can't imagine the Three Stooges apart. It's like there's a force that binds them together. It seems somehow wrong to see Abbott standing next to another guy.
Well, like a lookalike who like did the voice and everything.
Like it seems like oh god, I don't want to like that's a betrayal. That's like seeing your parents divorce or something.
Well, what about the Three Stooges? And there's Curly Joe Dorita.
Oh, well, that's different.
Yeah, that's different.
Because I grew up with Curly Joe. So I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe there was something between Abbott and Costello. Maybe there was a force that brought them together and made them a great comedy team.
I mean, they were so successful. How could there not be?
Yeah. How can you, Justin, argue?
I'm not arguing. I agree with you.
All right. Well, glad we brought you around. You're on team Abbott now.
Yeah. Throw out all my Three Stooges merchandise and DVDs.
I'm a bad boy.
If I gave you a choice of watching a Three Stooges short or an Abbott and Costello one, which one would you go for?
I'd go with the Three Stooges.
Okay. Yeah. We interrupt this regular scheduled programming to thank some of our Patreon subscribers, who include Kyle Bycroft, Cody Vandenberg, Joel J. Lohman, William Love, Ryan Leduc, and Jesse Edwards. We really appreciate you become Patreon subscribers. We hope you enjoy all of the back catalog that we have of the Director's Cut series, which has now hit 150 episodes with this week's posting. If you'd like to become a Patreon subscriber, we'd really appreciate it, and you can do it at patreon.com/theimportantcinemaclub. You can also write us a review on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate when you do that. Leave some words, hit that star rating. It just helps spread the show and gives us the energy to keep going. Just want to remind everybody that the new release of Gold Ninja Video, Death Warrior, is now available for pre-order at goldninjavideo.com. Me and Will talk about it more next week, but we also talked about this movie and its star, Janae Arkin, in The Man Who Stole Star Wars, which came out a few weeks ago. So check that out. You'll definitely want to see the movie Death Warrior after that, and go pick up the Gold Ninja Video release. It's $10. It's limited edition, and I did a whole ton of new special features for it. Now, back to the show.
Do we have any letters this week?
We do. As per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. Our first letter is from Noah Taylor, and it goes, Dear Important Cinema Club, a little while back I listened to your Best of 2019 episode and was surprised that Will included S. Craig Zoller's Dragged Across Concrete. I wasn't a big fan of his first two films, but I decided to give it a shot. Unfortunately, I found it aggressively flat in every way. However, in the same conversation, you talked about Zoller's career as a novelist, which I was unaware of. I took out Congregation of Jackals from the library and loved it, and since that I've been reading every book of his that I can get my hands on. Are there any other writer-directors that have gone back and forth between fiction and film like he has? I know Cronenberg put out a novel, but can't think of any other examples. And since I'm guilty of being a film bro, I will of course be reading any novels that QT claims he'll be putting out. Cheers, Noah. Quentin Tarantino's never going to write a novel.
Yeah, geez, Noah, you just named the two directors that would have been my instant 1 and 2. I'm having trouble thinking of like another film director who also did notable novels.
Yeah, notable novels. Like, I was thinking, John Sayles wrote a bunch of novels that I see in used bookstores sometimes.
Yeah.
Gus Van Sant kind of, like, played with that a little bit.
But it's like,
Noah Ephron, but she kind of came out of writing. And she didn't write novels, did she?
Yeah. What was the movie called? Heartburn? That was Noah Ephron, right?
Yeah, that was Noah Ephron. And the novel that was based on her own life kind of thing. Yeah.
But she was a writer first, I guess.
As opposed to people who like are filmmakers and then become novelists.
Was Chantal Akerman a novelist? I know she wrote books.
Nothing springs to mind.
Oh yeah, you know who springs to mind? Ed Wood.
That's right.
He wrote over 100 novels.
Yeah, but those novels came out of desperation as a way to pay the bills.
Yeah, those are pretty sexy books. Yeah, that is strange though. I mean, you think of the great writer-directors. And I'm having trouble.
I think that when, like, film becomes the medium that you can express yourself in and you're big enough to do that, you just do it through film. Yeah. And novels are sometimes more difficult because you're working alone. You can't boss people around.
And a script is a very different thing from a novel. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not.
I wouldn't know. Our next letter's from Brendan White, and it goes, Hello, fellow dudes. I'm a relatively new listener, and I've been going through the archives of your show recently. I live in Chicago, and this morning, while making my breakfast, I listened to the episode where Will almost uncontrollably denigrates Joe Swanberg. I laughed out loud almost nonstop throughout. I don't even remember that.
That was the Mumblecore.
Yeah, but did we, like, riff on him that bad or, like, rip him apart?
I guess we must have. I mean, that's funny because I hear it now, and it's like, I don't think of myself as having a lot of particular ill will towards Joe Swanberg. I'm not a fan, really.
Yeah, but now it's frozen in amber, forever to be revisited upon whoever stumbles upon it. One thing I really love about the podcast is a pluralistic idea of cinema your overlapping but different tastes allow for. And I was curious, do you guys have an opinion on the films of Samuel Fuller? I started watching his movies only last year after reading a Godard biography, but I've enjoyed almost every one of them, and they really seem up your guys' alley. Stylish, pulpy, inventive, short, weird. Manny Farber's essay on him is a long, laudatory insult, a backhanded compliment that totally convinced me that I had to see every one of his mentioned movies. My apologies if you covered this in an earlier mailbag. Keep up the good work. Yours, Brendan. P.S. I'm now 180 pages into Jimmy McDonough's The Ghastly One. Holy shit! Oh, enjoy.
That's the Andy Milligan biography for those who don't remember.
Or who have not listened to the Andy Milligan episode that we did.
Which
you should check it out. Some people were writing on the Discord, which you can join if you're a Patreon member, that like, I never heard about Andy Milligan. I'm going to go buy some of his movies now. And I was like, good luck. Wow. But they said they liked it.
Oh, that's good, because that's a lot of responsibility to put on us.
Again, like I said at the end of the episode, we hedged our bets. we were not like, this is the true John Cassavetes of the Gunners.
But Samuel Fuller, I mean,
love Samuel Fuller.
Him. Yeah, he's great.
I wonder why he's never come up before.
I feel like we've talked about doing him before, like as like a long time ago, but it was just I think maybe I wanted to see more movies.
I think you actually said that. You said, I want to see more Samuel Fuller films before I get to it.
And I feel like I probably have.
Yeah, you've seen Shark with Burt Reynolds?
No, I haven't seen that. And I haven't seen Dead Pigeon on Beethoven Street.
Oh, you've had the Blu-ray for so long!
I know. It's so long, though.
It is, the German TV movie that he made.
But I have definitely, like, accumulated a lot of Samuel Fuller watching over the years, and I love him. He's great.
Yeah.
White Dog, Shock Corridor.
You know what? Speaking of novelists that are also filmmakers, Samuel Fuller.
Excellent.
Yeah, right there.
Yes.
So we're definitely going to see Samuel Fuller probably sooner than later, I would say.
Now that it's back on our radar. I would love to watch some Samuel Fuller soon.
So,
and I love him in Return to Salem's Lot.
Oh, he is so good in Return to Salem's Lot, the Larry Cohen sequel to the Stephen King, Tobe Hooper film.
That's right.
So this week on our Patreon episode, we're going to be talking about Lung Kar Yan. Wait, who's that, Will? I've never heard this name before.
Well, he's the star of a recent Golden Ninja video release, The Thundering Mantis, but also a journeyman martial arts actor, somebody who Justin's taken a shine to.
Yep.
And he's great.
Yeah, he is great.
And yeah, we're gonna get into him and maybe some issues surrounding the Thundering
Mantis, specifically what it's most famous for.
Which you want to know, folks.
Yeah. Don't read the back cover of the Blu-ray that I put out where it gives you the answer to that.
Oh, and by the way, there's also the Discord server on the Patreon. Mm-hmm. If you join the Patreon, you can
chit-chat with me and Will.
Like-minded folks.
Yeah, it's fairly active and it's a lot of fun, so check it out. It's $5 a month at patreon.com/theimportantcinemaclub. So next week, what are we doing, Will?
We're doing Jama Fanaka. Sorry if that's the wrong pronunciation. He was a filmmaker, part of the LA Rebellion, which was a group of independent black filmmakers in the 70s and 80s.
But he's most famous for directing the Penitentiary trilogy.
Yes, he's a filmmaker who definitely straddles the line between art and exploitation. He made a film called Welcome Home, Brother Charles, which... Everybody knows it as the movie where a black man has a gigantic penis that kills people.
But that's not really what it's about.
In fact, that only happens in the last 5 minutes, and the rest of it is almost like a social realist drama.
Which is also like the other film that's included on the Vinegar Syndrome disc, MMA as well. And he's a man who sued some Hollywood producers for like not giving him opportunities or some other reason related to that I'm sure we will discover when we talk about him next episode.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Penitentiary movies, so I'm excited to
Oh man, each one is crazier than the last.
All right.
I think it's the second one, Mr. T is in it, and me and my friends had a joke that it sounds like Mr. T's going to cancer at one point. That's not what he's saying, but that's what it sounds like he's saying. So
can't wait.
Yeah, tons of fun. I mean, Penitentiary 3 is super famous for how wacky it is, that there's like little people wrestling, like people's heads get knocked off and stuff like that. Yeah. So, yep. That's what we're going to be doing next week. And until then, my name's Justin DeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. Will, you watched one of the first VHS movies ever recently, David A. Pryor's Sledgehammer.
That's right. I have the Intervision DVD, and according to the back cover, it says that this was the first shot-on-video horror movie made exclusively for the video market.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I think Boarding House is technically the first one, but that one was blown up to 35 millimeter and released theatrically.
Yeah. Well, this movie was directed by a guy who later went on to make a lot of, like, direct-to-video action movies starring people like Robert Davi.
Well, he's most famous also for directing with his brother Deadly Prey. Everybody's seen that like trailer online, that Rambo ripoff, where the guy like cuts a guy's arm off, and yeah, that was like a bad movie classic that was going around for a while.
But this was his first movie. In theory, it's a generic slasher movie, bunch of teens in a house that's haunted by the, I want to say, ghost of...
I don't know what's going on in this movie.
So, 10 years ago at this regular suburban
You're gonna
house.
try to explain.
I am.
Yeah.
10 years ago at this regular suburban house, there was a little boy. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm already forgetting. The boy killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. The boy killed, or was it his parents who killed the boy?
Where am I? Who am I talking to here? Joe Biden?
Yeah. Brain worse. Well, anyway, what matters is that they're haunted by the ghost of the boy,
who can also turn into a sledgehammer and a large man in a mask, depending on what the movie wants to do.
And I would say there's, about 20 minutes of stuff in this movie. They spread it out to 85 minutes.
I hope you like slow motion, because, oh boy, is there a lot of it. People walk across screen, you're going to watch it in slow motion.
We've talked on this podcast about slow cinema where it's giving you so little and you're sort of forced to like come up to the screen and like put something onto it. And I would say the same principle applies here.
And everyone is such a huge jerk in the movie too.
Yeah.
And there's like scenes that it looks like they just put the camera down and like improv, just do what you want. There's like a food fight that breaks out.
Oh yeah, and it's a bunch of teens and they're all like 35.
Yeah, it's just huge jerks.
And the house where it's set in is not particularly photogenic.
I believe it was one of the guy's apartments that they ended up shooting in, but they make it look like a house.
Yeah, there's a hallway that we spend a lot of time in.
But what's great about it is that it devolves at the end into just crazy nonsense that has no narrative or kind of regard with storytelling or physics. And it's the perfect kind of VHS movie because it's made by people who have no idea how to make a film.
It's sort of interesting to me how the, I guess, cult movie landscape has evolved in my lifetime. When I was, a kid and I had Video Hounds, Cult Flicks, and Trash Picks, this sort of movie would never have been in there. Never. The sort of stuff that book was interested in was like Roger Corman, Ed Wood, a bit of Trauma, stuff like that. That was George A. Romero, that sort of cult, like American independent cult cinema from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
But now, I think that all the detritus that has been kind of just laid out that just was released during the video store era, people are rediscovering it and applying value to it that it never had when it came out.
And a lot of that has to do with like cycles of nostalgia. So when a book like Video Hounds, Cult Flicks, and Trash Picks came out, there was still like nostalgia for the 50s.
Yeah, I think it also has a lot to do with the video era was the first time that people that didn't know what they were doing could pick up cameras and shoot something at a price point that they could afford to just create when, if you're shooting a 35-16 Super 8, it's very cost prohibitive. And their movie would share the same shelf space with a Hollywood blockbuster. It didn't matter.
Right. I also think nostalgia is important though, because the fact that shot on video stuff, early video photography is so outmoded now. And we're nostalgic for it, and it looks beautiful because it's not like in the 80s this would have been looked at as that's
cheap.
The cheap format, whereas now, particularly because people don't use it anymore, you're able to see what's beautiful about it.
It's like painting with different brushes. Like something like Sledgehammer, they're using such ancient video technology. It's like tube stuff, so lights blur when you move the camera.
I mean, I was thinking about that when we watched Bill Gunn's Personal Problems.
Exactly, which is also prevalent in Sledgehammer.
Yeah.
So it's nice that all of this detritus can finally be kind of rediscovered by people who, I guess, are hungry for new stuff, because we have access to everything. So we're just looking for aesthetically something that is different and has a voice.
Yeah, just like new weird textures. I mean, this is a movie that's often mentioned in the same breath as Things, the
masterpiece,
the ridiculous Canadian shot on video horror movie, which is probably like the best example of this sort of thing. It's amazing. Stuff like that where it's like the cinematography and the pace gives it a weird hypnotic quality.
Things is like an Evil Dead. Sledgehammer is like Antonioni.
Yeah,
where
right.
It's like, this is for the true connoisseur.
That's
but
right.
Intervision put together a beautiful DVD that came out years ago. So go snatch it up before it's too late.